Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Women's Agenda webinar on leadership in a crisis. I have on the line here Dr. Kirstin Ferguson. How are you, Kirstin?
I am well, considering. It's lovely to chat with you.
Nice to chat with you as well. I believe you're in Brisbane and working from home.
Even better. I'm on the Sunshine Coast where I've recently moved and it's beautiful. I'd love everyone to write who's attending where they're listening from, because I think this is also the new normal, Angela, where we're all going to be dialing in from wherever we are.
Yes, exactly. So feel free to share where you're working from today and anything you might want to say about whether your home or what your office looks like, anything like that. I am sitting in our empty Agenda Media office here in Sydney. Our team is all working remotely and I was able to come in quietly this morning. I have a few internet concerns that we're working on at home, but we will get there.
Now is not the time to have to deal with that.
Yes.
I must say there are some positives to having a non-video working from home webinar, and I'm hoping everyone listening is as comfortable as I am with my hair up in a ponytail and definitely wearing comfortable clothes. But anyway, we've got serious things to talk about, but it's nice to do it comfortably.
Yes, absolutely. So this chat will go for around 30 minutes and we invite you to ask questions in the question panel. This is the first webinar we've done on Women's Agenda in quite a while, and it's something that we are looking to do a lot more of at this current time for quite obvious reasons. We think it's a great way to try and connect with different people and to engage in different subjects that come up along the way, and really important, I think, to make sure that we're all participating in things and working with each other collaboratively, even though we can't be with each other in person. So the first of many to come. So Kirstin, first of all, I got in touch with you over the weekend after I saw that you'd written this brilliant article looking at leadership in the current crisis and looking at COVID-19 and some of the things that were going on and some of the things that you believe are really necessary right now from leaders. I thought I could start by asking a little bit about why you decided to write that piece, and what are your current feelings on the situation right now?
Well, I think this webinar we're going to focus on leadership. So obviously I'm not going to comment at all on the actual health crisis, which we know is horrifying and not great. But what interests me, and I guess we've all got our own sort of different areas of expertise we can apply to a crisis, and I was really interested to watch all sorts of leaders, and this is not about any one leader or any type of leader. I think all of us, and I'm actually quite forgiving of our leaders, all of them, because no one can prepare for this. This is something that, you know, there was absolutely no way you could anticipate how you might react. So I guess I wrote that piece because I was observing from many leaders that there was this real reluctance to be upfront and honest and say, yeah, I've got a level with you. And in fact, it was Boris Johnson who used those words. And that was exactly what I thought was needed in the circumstances, because it is a sort of ingrained way we've always led during a normal crisis, where we're taught to keep everyone calm, you know, only sort of share what's needed to be shared in that moment, while in the background you're furiously, you know, trying to fix things. This is a crisis unlike any normal crisis, for want of a better word, in that we're all, as in the public, witnessing the sort of impact that it's having every day, and it's already now affecting all of our lives, whether you can get your toilet paper or whatever it might be. It's not as though we can't see the impact. And so hearing from anyone that actually, you know, it's all going to be okay and there's nothing to really panic about and everyone just needs to calm down, is actually counterproductive, and there's all sorts of psychological reasons why that is. And I think the reason I wrote that piece was because it was almost a call for this idea of just extreme transparency and honesty. I don't know if anyone listening has seen the Singapore COVID-19 site. Definitely go and take a look. You can actually read the detail about every single case they have, where they are. There's maps showing if they're still in hospital and which hospital, and it's extremely transparent. And it reassures people that not only leaders are in control, but it also reassures you that you're not going crazy. So the more someone's telling you, no, it's all fine and I'm going to keep doing things and I'm doing this, that and the other, yet you know, or your perception is that can't be right, it decreases trust. So I think I was all about just trying to implore leaders to be radically honest or extremely honest and disclose everything they can, because it really actually reassures people and builds trust as opposed to the other side of things.
Yes, so we will put a link to that example that you just shared there, Kirstin. I mean, we do have one in Australia that has been produced by a journalist, which I want to point out now. It's called covid19data.com.au. So it's somebody who's just done this independently. It's by Juliet O'Brien, and we'll also put the link to that as well. And it really shows the data in great detail. And it's one of those things where I think that this is confronting stuff, and we might not want to see it and we might not want to hear about it. And it goes back to that idea of, it feels like, you know, the natural response should be to keep everybody calm, but information really is powerful at this point.
Absolutely. And I know that website you're talking about, and I saw someone has asked for a link to that article, so we definitely will. And in fact, I've expanded on that original post and we'll share the link for that as well. But information is king, and it helps us feel calm to know what's going on. And so I think that's really what prompted the article. But what I'm seeing is a real challenge for all leaders, and I firmly believe every single one of us is a leader. It doesn't matter what it says on your business card. We're leaders in our businesses or our communities or our families, whatever it might be. And I've always been a believer in emotional intelligence, and never before has that been more important. And so I'm not sure if you've heard of a guy called Admiral Jim Stockdale, who was a prisoner of war in the Vietnam War in the famous Hanoi Hilton. And he was written about by Jim Collins. Anyway, he's got this amazing quote that I think every leader through this crisis could live by. And he said, "You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be." And Jim Collins ended up calling that the Stockdale paradox. And I think that's exactly how we need our leaders to lead at the moment. And this is about where you balance retaining faith that you're going to prevail, so you have a real sureness of success. We know, all of us know, that we will get through this. The country might look different, we might behave differently, we might work differently, but we will succeed. But at the same time, we have to balance that and confront the brutal facts of the situation. And so I think that's what I'm really calling on leaders, or advising leaders to do, is being really emotionally intelligent about being self-aware of the impact of everything that you say and do, having empathy for people and trusting yourself. And I think we'll talk through some of those a bit more in a moment. But this idea of really balancing the brutal facts with a sureness of success, I think is critical right now.
Absolutely. Another example that we spoke about a little bit earlier was from Dr. Michael Ryan. And we've actually put a story on him on our website yesterday, and we feature his YouTube video there. So he's a WHO executive director, and he had this amazing quote. It's almost poetic the way he said it, but it's obviously getting a lot of attention. And I'll just read it out to you. It's that perfection is the enemy of the good when it comes to emergency management. Speed trumps perfection. The greatest error is not to move. The greatest error is to be paralyzed by the fear of failure.
Yeah, I mean, that has gone viral for very good reason. It is spot on. Yes. So how many of us in a normal situation would be wanting time to plan and to get our resources together and to strategize as to what's going to be the most effective outcome? And then you go through the stages of change and you try and bring everyone on board. We've got to do all of that sort of instantly. And that is a huge mind shift for how we operate. But people are absolutely looking to leaders to do that. And I think the medical community in particular, if you watch any of the news programs at the moment, they're really crying out for immediate change. And it's interesting watching people's inability to make a very extreme change quickly. You know, there's an ingrained reluctance in our brain to even accept that that might be possible. And I have no idea what went on behind the scenes, say for the Formula One cancellation. But for those who weren't close to it almost a week or two out, you could see that it was inevitable that it probably wasn't going to go ahead. Yet there was incremental steps to try and prevent that for very good financial and strategic reasons. And then in the end, of course, the outcome was the same. And there's other things, I'm looking at the Olympics, and of course I'd love for the Olympics to go ahead, but I sit back very distant from that decision and think it seems impossible. But your brain almost can't get there. It takes time to accept that change. What we need leaders to do is to help people feel comfortable with very rapid change and reassure them through being authentic and courageous and transparent that we do have that sureness, we will succeed.
So I want to get to we do want to share some tips, or Kirstin has got some tips to share. And I guess we wanted to frame this from the idea that we can all be leading something, that you don't have to be, your traditional definition of a leader to be able to take something away from this conversation. We might be leading in a workplace, a team, we might be leading in a community, leading in our families, just leading in various ways in terms of how we choose to present ourselves on social media or wherever it is. There's opportunities for us to lead in many different capacities right now. But before we get to some of those tips, Kirstin, I did want to ask you, and I think I might be putting you a little bit on the spot here, but the idea of it is quite a terrifying time. And I know that I wouldn't be alone in saying that I do feel a level of anxiety that I haven't felt before. That is, it feels like it's simmering under the surface, under kind of everything that I do right now. We're trying to go about things as normally as we can, continue with our work, but there is this a bit of that sense of anxiety, that fear, that concern. Am I making the right decisions in what we do day to day? So do you have any tips around, first, it feels like we do need to find a way to push through a little bit of that fear.
Yeah, and it's completely natural. I think every single person on the planet right now would be feeling how you're feeling. And, for people in positions of disadvantage or that are vulnerable to this virus, I can only imagine how difficult that is. I think what it does come back to what would reassure us right now, and having a single source of truth would be helpful. I know on a personal note, I do get confused about what I'm hearing, and every new medical expert I listen to might have some different advice, and that increases that sense of anxiety. And again, it's because we sort of need our leaders to really narrow down where we're getting our information, but then there needs to be a level of trust. So obviously Norman Swan is doing an incredible job, and I shared a tweet, asking everyone to share the love with him yesterday, and it's had thousands and thousands of people, because he's almost become a de facto source of truth, different reasons. But, ultimately I think until we understand the uncertainty is fueling our anxiety, and no one can solve that for us. So I think individually we're all going to need to become comfortable with that uncertainty, and that's really challenging. I'd encourage anyone listening to go and have a listen though to the Singapore Prime Minister's speech he did to the nation. I think it was on the 12th of March. If you Google that, it's in YouTube. And he is a picture of calm reassurance, but his words do not hold back. He says this is going to be really bad. There's going to be dreadful consequences for Singapore, and yet they're managing it as best as anyone. But what I really liked about what he does is he says he's sharing their plans with them in real detail, because he wants to make sure that they're on top of things. And he says, I want to be open and transparent with you, because I trust that you will hear it and support us. And there's just different language, and I think it's a really good example of trying to reassure, trying to balance, the brutal facts with a sureness of success. And while I can't reassure you personally, and because I think we're all in the same boat, I do think there's ways that for all of us who lead others, there's ways we can help with that. And perhaps that's what we might talk about now, just some of those ideas.
Yes. So let's get to, we try to keep this, just to keep this as simple as possible. So what I did is I just pulled out some of those key points that Kirstin had in her piece, but there will be more than that. But I thought maybe we could start by going through these 5 key points as really ingredients of leadership in a crisis, and ingredients of leadership in this particular crisis right now. And just a reminder that we've got the Q&A open there. So you might, if you have a comment or you'd like to ask a question, please do so, and we'll get to those questions towards the end of the session.
Great. Yes. Am I still on?
Yes, we can hear.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Okay, so the downside of working from home is I'm left to my own devices on my computer and I've lost you on my screen. Anyway, so the first thing is around this, idea of transparency and honesty. And I think a lot of that comes back also to being really self-aware. And I think it's being self-aware that everything right now that you're as a leader saying and doing, whether in your families or, as I said, at work, it's being observed in a much more heightened way than usual because people are really scared. Now, a really small example that I saw just before I dialed into this was that the White House had a press conference this morning, and it was all focused on updating the American people on what's happening. It was pleading for them for the social distancing. Yet, as they were speaking, they were squashed onto a podium. There was like 10 people in about 2 square meters. Now, the health implications of doing that is one thing, but from a leadership point of view, the fact that there wasn't anyone in that group that was self-aware enough means it ultimately undermines everything that they said. And it tells people that, sometimes it's okay not to do what's being asked. Obviously in that situation, someone decided it was okay. And so that reduces trust. For many people, that'll increase panic that leaders don't have this under control. Now, that's a really small example. But another one was I was at an event yesterday where the vast majority of people who were to attend did so by live stream. So last week they were going to attend in person, and as of yesterday they didn't. Now, I really encouraged the leader of that organisation to thank them when he got up to speak, because those people are making decisions and they're role modelling what we want to see more of. So the words of that leader in that moment really mattered, and I'm sure they'll see more and more of that. So I think this self-awareness of the impact that you're having on others is more critical now than ever.
I think we've seen some examples with the handshaking as well, where you'll get the advice not to shake hands.
Yeah.
You see the leader go and shake the hand.
Now, I know. Now that's I see that slightly differently. It is a big ingrained habit to
it's
end.
A hard one to break.
And I must admit, yesterday, I didn't do it, but nearly did. And so I'm a bit more forgiving on that one. The optics of squishing everyone onto a podium when you're talking about social distancing, that seems like a bit of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And there's either no one's brave enough to, say something, but ultimately you look to the leader and you think, well, what on earth are you doing? The next one's around empathy. And again, that is vital all the time, clearly, but I really think so right now. People are absolutely scared, and the panic in the shops that we're seeing, I think that's just a symptom of that. And, rather than ridiculing those people, which I think is easy to do, and maybe it's our default sense of humour anyway to get through difficult times. But I think as leaders, we actually need to ask ourselves why that's happening. Why is it that people in those shops aren't trusting our leaders, including the people who make the products, that it's going to be available? And I think all of us need to really have empathy and try and understand what's driving other people in their decision making right now, and really get back to the root cause of what was my contribution to that. Now, obviously on a macro level, I don't think any of us are responsible for panic buying, but I do think there's some questions that leaders need to think about for themselves. Courage is really that idea that the World Health Organization director, I think it's Michael Ryan, talked about. And, I believe that's just trusting yourself. You cannot wait for all the information to be available. It just isn't there. So if you're sort of waiting to see if you should send people home from work, if you're in a business, or waiting to see the impact it's going to have financially, I suspect you'll be too slow. And that's a scary, place to be, obviously, because you are being expected to make decisions far more quickly than you've ever had to make them. But I would just encourage you not to have any regrets or not worry about those mistakes. Pretty much it's guaranteed you're going to get some things wrong. I think we all are. And that's just the price of leading through this crisis. Just please don't be paralysed by fear or a need to plan. And I know that's going to be a different mindset, but really your legacy as a leader is being set right now. And people will remember how you led them through this crisis and the courage you showed and your courage to make decisions, even with only small amounts of information. And as terrifying as that is, they will respect you more for it, for having had the courage to do so. And even if you make mistakes, I think there'll be far more forgiveness than by not doing anything at all.
I think that's a really good point. And I mean, I wanted to ask about decision making, and you have answered a lot of it there, but it feels like the decisions that we need to make as leaders now, obviously, are so much more consequential than usual. It can affect people's health and it can affect the community. But I think that that's probably a good framework to look at it through, is the no regrets framework, that there will be the short-term pain, but we want to avoid the regrets over the long term.
Yeah, and I like some of the medical or the pandemic specialists saying, you know, they know they know they are successful if in a few months' time everyone criticises them for overreacting, because that means we have averted it. And so I think if we apply that lesson in our businesses, those things we're thinking of doing, but I don't know, we're waiting for some kind of measure. Let's see if someone gets it in my office first before we do X. I don't know whether that's the way to go. It is a very individual decision. And, you know, I've spoken with so many different leaders over the last little while, and every company has a different example. You know, not everyone can work from home. There's tradespeople and there's people supporting our, you know, defence forces and in our hospitals, and so many frontline workers that can't work from home. And so they're having to get really creative about how they protect their people. But for those who are working in a more traditional environment that can send people from home, as unexpected as 2020 has become, we never thought we would see this. I think it's adjusting your decision making and making it a really quick decision about what's best for your people.
Yeah. So let's move on to that final one that you have there, emotional intelligence.
Yeah, well, that really wraps up, I think, everything that we've been talking about. You know, I even well before this, I've always spoken about how intellect is one thing. You know, obviously to get in the room, whatever your job might be, you've had the intellect to be there. And, you know, that's great, but it's also capable of being learnt. And I know for myself, you know, I can learn something. Doesn't mean I'm brilliant at it, but I can learn it. Far more challenging is having this emotional intelligence to capture everything that we've talked about. But I think it's a much more important skill for leaders, particularly right now, because it really doesn't matter how smart someone might be that's leading the organisation. If they're not self-aware, if they're not having empathy with their people, if they're not making decisions quickly and trusting in themselves, then I think you're going to find yourself paralysed with inactivity. And that Stockdale paradox we talked about, which I'm going to keep coming back to, this ability to be able to balance two things at once, really knowing we're going to succeed, but also transparently and courageously sharing the brutal facts of what we're dealing with. That requires emotional intelligence, and it requires you to use the levers of your knowledge about yourself and about your people and about what's working and reassuring them and what's not, and what's building trust and what's losing trust. All of that requires an antenna that's not one that we necessarily think about all the time, but I think is incredibly important right now.
Okay, so just we will be finishing up in a few minutes. So just a reminder that if you do have any questions, to please type them in that box and send them through. We have got a really good question there, and it's a difficult question, and I think that you can see it from your end, Kirstin.
I can, yeah.
Are
you going to ask that just so everyone else can hear broadly what it is? Or?
Yes, just in case everyone can't see it, but it is, and I feel like this is one that will come up because we are being impacted. It's the other side of it. It's when you're being impacted by the decisions of other leaders. Yeah. So this has come through anonymously. They've said that they're managing a large team, want to lead by example, not to panic, and come to work at the company, which is come to work as the company has not made the decision to work from home. 32 weeks pregnant, and asking, should they go against the company's current policy and work from home, or stay calm and carry on based on the company and government guidance? It's a question they said that they're grappling with. They said that they're not expecting us to answer it for them, obviously. But,
I've got a view on what
gosh,
that raises so many things. So firstly, that there's a company that hasn't come to someone who is vulnerable at 32 weeks pregnant and asked what would work best for you. I would encourage any leaders in that position to have already done that. But I would also hope it's a culture, which it clearly isn't because you're asking a question, where you could go and speak to your supervisor or manager and express your concerns. This is no different to any other health and safety issue. And, that's my background as well as in health and safety, where if someone doesn't feel safe at work for whatever reason, then leaders absolutely need to take action to do something about that. So I think for that person who's 32 weeks pregnant, and good luck, and I hope you're feeling well and that everything goes beautifully, to be able to find a leader. It might not be your leader perhaps, but go and find a leader in your organisation and express your concerns. I would be just dumbfounded if there was a business that, or any organisation, that wasn't prepared to make some adjustments, and even if you would become an exception to your current policy. Because you're pregnant. So it's clearly weighing on your mind, and I really think, you should speak to somebody about it. Yes. And as a leader's, from the leader's perspective, look out for those people who might be vulnerable, whatever way that they are, and go to them. That's where my mind immediately went, thinking, I'd be horrified to think that you had someone in your organisation in this position. So leaders, go and find anyone who's feeling uncomfortable. So another one there was from Ruth McGowan, asking a bit about self-care tips. And I think, it's in the context, I guess, of being a leader as well, because it is, as I mentioned before, that, that anxiety that might be bubbling under the surface. It's that this need to make decisions, really important decisions about the health and well-being of not only your staff, but your family and the community, everything. What are your self-care tips at this point, Kirstin? I mean, what are you personally doing? What would you advise other people? Yeah, and I think if you are someone who's prone to being self-aware, which I hope I am, I'm really observing what's going on for me. And I noticed when I went to the supermarket the other day on the weekend, Saturday, it was more anxiety inducing than having watched ABC News for 24 hours. You get caught up in the panic. And, I realised as I'm putting in an extra bag of rice that I really don't need, but, everyone else was, that psychology of what we're all living in at the moment requires us to take self-care. So one was, I'm not going back to the supermarket unless I have to. The second is, I've found myself, really bunkering down. Now I'm really fortunate and privileged that I can do that. So I can continue to do my meetings virtually and things like that. But for me, that's given a sense of control and safety, I guess, and security. And I'm very happy to be at home with family. My biggest problem right now is that, how people are talking about the baby boom that's going to happen in 9 months' time, which absolutely isn't happening in my household, not with a 20-year-old and 18-year-old that's just left. But now I've got in my head that I want to get a puppy. So I think it's the equivalent. And so that's my self-care right now. My poor husband's thinking, I've had that exact same thing in my head over the weekend. Now is the time to get that puppy. And I did mention it to my partner, and not on board. I know. So look, whatever it takes, everyone's a little bit different. I do think just listen to yourself and really be self-aware of what you need right now. I know I feel much more secure and comfortable and really focused on work and motivated by being here at the moment. And so that's what I'm going to do. But I think whatever it might be, whatever you need to do to get through, I would encourage you, and speak to your employers if you need to. And for leaders, go and ask each of the, if you've got a smaller team, go and ask them what they actually need if they're struggling to come in each day right now. Okay, so there's just a few more questions. We might need to cut off the questions then, because we are running out of time, but it'd be great to get to these ones. So I'll read out this one. Sorry, can I just mention and just do a quick plug? Please continue to hold on to those questions though, because they can send them through. I'm answering them on LinkedIn through leading content. Now I know you're going to mention that at the end, but just please hold on to your questions. Don't not think of them. Yes, absolutely, because this is an ongoing conversation, and Kirstin has launched this weekly newsletter
which is it is focused on leading in a crisis. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's called Leading Content. It's on LinkedIn, so just find me on LinkedIn. Up until last week, it was a monthly newsletter with recommendations on podcasts to listen to and books to read and TV shows to watch.
But we still need all that, so continue with that.
So yes, we do need that. So you can go and look at the other editions. But no, I've refocused that. I've pivoted, as they say. And there's just so much demand. I'm getting asked so many questions about leading through this crisis, and I'm taking people's questions and answering those. So please jump online and subscribe. I think there's almost 3,500 subscribers already. So I know what my little project's going to be in home isolation for the moment. So look forward to seeing you there. Anyway, sorry.
Okay, so we might, we'll try and get to these. I think there's 3 questions there. So there's a few. Okay. So the first one, sometimes stakeholders or the wider public are not as forgiving when a mistake is made, and trust can be very hard to regain as a result of a mistake. This will depend on the organizational or social culture of where you're in, but how would you approach this with courage if there are so many unknowns?
Yeah. God, that's a good question.
It is the real issue, isn't it?
But people are more forgiving if you've got a lot of trust in the bank. If you're in credit with trust and you've already, you've got a really good platform and people believe what you've said, when you do make a mistake and you very quickly fess up to it and say, look, I got this wrong. This is the information I was determining it on. And look, I should have done this or that or the other. I don't believe you do lose that much trust, and a mistake can be more readily forgiven. Everything you're saying there to the questioner, I absolutely believe a public is unforgiving where there is no trust already. And so a mistake just sort of confirms that view that we shouldn't have trusted this person all along. That is difficult to overcome. And in fact, I wonder whether, in some situations it's better to then find a different person, if it's a person or a different organisation, to actually communicate the information. Because right now what matters is finding a trusted source of information to calm Australians, if we're thinking at that broad level, or within your organisation, if the reality is that someone is just not heard or is trusted, you need to find the person that is. And it might not be the traditional leader. But I do believe that people can be forgiving if the leader has that self-awareness that they've stuffed up, and they're very quickly open about that and explain why, and then explain what they're doing to do things differently and to fix it.
Okay. So another question, how much should we be advocating for further measures from leaders?
Hello, Alicia. Thank you for your question. Oh, look, I don't, this really wasn't about what I think our national leaders should or shouldn't be doing. And as I said at the very beginning, no one could have prepared for this. And I think there's plenty of people out there saying what they should, they would like to see from their leaders. So I think I think I'd rather just stick to what I can control, and as a leader myself, and hopefully share that with other leaders about things they might like to think about themselves.
Okay. All right. I'll do one more, because I did say I'd do those 3, but another bunch have come through. So, but as we mentioned a few minutes ago.
This is because we're all at home or working, and we can just keep chatting. I like this.
But I just want to do one more, and that was from
Sure.
Gillian Davey. People are now looking for something more in their leaders, so better EQ, better comms, etc. Could this change what organisations expect in the current and future leaders post this situation? Which I think is a really great question to end on.
That is 100% yes, yes, and yes. And I would have hoped we could have had people focusing on this without needing a pandemic. But if a pandemic is what it takes, I definitely think for future leaders, this is going to be, it's such a cliche, the new normal. I think being able to lead people you can't physically see, that you're not in the same office with, requires a whole range of different skills that we're going to need to start educating leaders on how to do well. And being emotionally intelligent gives you a huge advantage in being able to tackle that. So absolutely believe this is the future. And, I'm excited by that, because leaders with high IQ are better leaders. And so if that's a positive outcome that comes from it, I hope something like that is. I can see there's other questions there, and I'm really happy to, for people to get in touch with me directly, Ange, if we've run out of time, or we can do them through this newsletter as well.
Okay, let's do that, because we just are a little bit short of time. And I also think that we could do a follow-up conversation in a couple of weeks' time. I think that'd be great. We could get you back in. So a reminder that, yeah, Kirstin, you're willing to answer these questions. It might be through a different forum. Unfortunately, we do need to close up for now, as I had only allocated the 30 minutes. And I think we've had a really great chat, and you've shared so much wisdom and advice there. It is so good, Kirstin. And I love that it is proactive, and it speaks to some hard truths and some difficult times, but I think there's some positives there to take away as well, so that you can immediately start applying in any part of your daily lives, no matter what kind of leader you are. So thank you so much, Kirstin.
Oh, no, it's a pleasure. And I genuinely think these kinds of forums will become more and more important, because we are all in our different places around the world or Australia, and, you know, we're not alone. Social media is going to be so important, I think, for connecting us all, and obviously these kinds of forums. So find me on any of the socials and DM me or whatever, and you're going to send the links to everything we've talked about.
Yep, we'll send through the links, and you'll also get a copy of this presentation and a link to subscribe to that Leading Content newsletter also.
That's
thank
great.
You so much for joining us, everybody.
And one last thing, puppy suggestions most welcome. I'm sure I'll have one by the time we chat next. Although I can see Joe is offering a very destructive Boston Terrier French Bulldog cross. So thank you, Joe.
There might be a run on dogs at the moment. So
okay, we've got to get off. We are going to keep talking about dogs now. All right, see you guys. Stay well.
Stay well, everybody. Thank you very much.
See you.